they will bring you in this world, do the bare minimum, and then they'll tell you that you need to exist for me and not for yourself. Imagine how painful, how pathetic it is. Hey everyone, I hope everyone is doing good and taking good care of themselves. So today I'm going to talk about emotional incest in narcissistic families. And before I get going, I would request you all to like, share, subscribe the channel, hit the notification bell so you guys are updated whenever we put out a new content. Today, I wanted to speak to a wound that many survivors carry, but often don't have, words to express it. And that wound is emotional incest, or what therapists also call covert incest. And when it happens in narcissistic families, trust me, it becomes even more manipulative and dangerous and damaging. Now let us understand briefly what emotional incest is. Emotional incest happens when a parent uses a child to fulfill their emotional and psychological needs that should have been met by another adult. It's not always sexual, but in some cases it is. But it's always, a kind of a boundary violation. The child becomes the parent's emotional spouse, their therapist, their biggest fan, their secret keeper, confidant, their emotional life support, and all sorts of things. This child is given more power they never asked for and responsibility they were never ready for. I mean, on the outside, it might look like closeness, that the parent and the child is so bonded, so close to each other. But to tell you honestly, it's just control. It's not closeness, love, unconditional love. No, it's just control. And the parent is doing whatever he or she wishes to with the child. And why do they do that? Why do they push boundary? Because they fail to see their kid as a separate individual. They see their kids as an extension of them. So if I like something, the kid is expected to like that. If I hate something, the kid is expected to hate that. And they are unable to see their kid as a separate individual. Yeah. And these individuals, these narcissistic parents, they have extreme sense of entitlement, and because of that they just don't care. They do lack empathy as well. And because of this entitled mindset, they just don't care what their action, behavior, the kind of treatment they are putting their kids through, how it's going to impact and affect the child. They just don't care. All what they care about is harvesting the supply. I gave birth to you to solely serve me. That's how it is, yeah, in narcissistic families. And to tell you honestly, even Carl Jung said that when the parent is too wounded to self-regulate, when the parent is damaged emotionally and on various levels, they may unconsciously choose their child to do the job of their partner. And to tell you honestly, if you dive deep into Freud's observation, Carl Jung's observation, they were correct, no matter how much people demonize them. But to tell you honestly, they were correct about a lot of things. I get it. I mean, there are certain things which is like a hard pill to swallow. But that doesn't mean such things don't exist. That doesn't mean that sexual relationship between a mother and her son, a daughter and her father doesn't exist. All of these things exist. Might not be very common, but these things exist. We do come across these things in newses, or some incident that happens. We do come across where the parent molests and rapes the child. So it's not that these things don't exist. It's absolutely foreign and alien. Yeah. And I mean, these religions, I mean, the co-creators of some kind of cultural norm, they want to hide all these things. They don't want to talk about these things, yeah, because they want things to look good. Again, a very narcissistic approach. It's all about the facade, and no deep work that is needed or required. It's all about the facade. That's it. It's all superficial. It's all about the exterior. That's it. Now, let us understand how these narcissistic parents use emotional incest. Now, imagine this dynamic, but with narcissistic parent. Someone who needs constant validation, who fears abandonment, who lacks emotional boundaries, and sees their child as an extension of themselves. That's not just emotional incest. That's weaponized enmeshment. Yeah, I mean, it's a step further. Yeah, it's not just enmeshment, it's beyond that, beyond enmeshment. The narcissistic parents will confide in the child about adult matters like sex, betrayal, finances, expects the child to comfort them emotionally, after conflict with the other parent or some other adult. The narcissistic parent might get jealous of child's romantic or social relationship. So if you're dating, or if you're going around, or if you have friends, these narcissistic parents are going to feel jealous. They hate it when you have other sources of validation and good things. They hate it. They want you to be tethered to them. They want you to be dependent on them. They don't want you to have a circle of your own, because then the probability and the chances of you outgrowing them and becoming independent is high. Yeah, and that's not what they have bred you for. The other thing these narcissistic parents do with their child is that they control the child's emotional world and punish them for having separate feeling or needs. So if you are feeling otherwise, or if your needs don't align with your parents' need, then they are going to punish you, they are going to hurt you. And this is basically to tell you, to teach you that your needs, your want, your feeling is irrelevant. Keep it aside. Just prioritize me. I am everything. Yeah. Narcissistic parents also treat their children as their everything. Yeah. And then shame or punish them for becoming independent. I mean, I have seen this. I mean, this is quite popular one. They are going to tell you, well, you are my everything, you are my world. And when you do something independently, then hell breaks loose, and then they are going to really screw your happiness. They're going to blame you, shame you, criticize you, invalidate you, do whatnot. Yeah, summon their flying monkeys, torment you emotionally. So narcissistic parents do a lot of things with their children. Yeah, and they get to do more of these things when they are able to establish this emotional incest, because it's beyond enmeshment. Yeah, it's a different level altogether. And then everything is legitimized. I'm a parent, after all. I'm your father, I'm your mother. I mean, I'm doing it for your greater good, I'm doing it for your well-being, wellness, all that bullshit. Yeah. And to tell you honestly, all of these things that they do with their children, it's nowhere close to genuine love. It's simply emotional ownership, yeah, and micromanaging every aspect of their kids' life. Now, there is an important thing, that a lot of us are unaware of, and that is that this emotional incest, also exists, between same gender, parent and child. I have talked about in the past about emotional incest between a narcissistic mother and her son, narcissistic father and his daughter. But to tell you honestly, emotional incest also occurs and happens, um, between same gender parent and child. And to tell you honestly, same gender emotional incest is just as real and often hidden in plain sight. Yeah. A narcissistic mother may pull her daughter into emotional triangulation against the father. She might treat her like a best friend while simultaneously sabotaging her autonomy. She might speak to her daughter about her own sexual insecurities, fears, even fantasies. This narcissistic mother might blur boundaries under the guise of being close, while punishing any attempts at separation or individuation. Yeah. And likewise, a narcissistic father may enmesh with his son by creating a buddy bond that excludes and belittles others, oversharing about personal issues and personal beliefs, using the son to emotionally compete with or emotionally replace the mother. And to tell you honestly, the key here is that gender doesn't protect a child from emotional incest. It only changes the mask it wears. Emotional incest is not just between a narcissistic mother and her son, a narcissistic father and his daughter. It can be with the same gender as well. Now let me talk about some extreme cases that is seen and that occurs when emotional incest is between the child and the narcissistic parent. And disclaimer that this is the darkest part of this topic. Yeah, so I mean, hear it if you're ready. Yeah. And I can assure you that I'll handle it with seriousness and care it deserves. Now, in the most extreme cases, I have observed narcissistic parents who feel emotionally abandoned may escalate their control into sexual violation. This usually happens not out of desire, but as a twisted need to reclaim control when the child begins to grow, separate, or challenge them. The parent cannot tolerate the child becoming independent. They fear abandonment, and in their pathological mind, this closeness is a way to stop the child from pulling away. And Freud, did talk about this. Yeah. Freud, in fact, said that in many cases, what the child experiences is not fantasy, but trauma. Yeah. And, we know that Freud talks a lot about, parent-child dynamics. Yeah. The unconscious, sexual tension in dysfunctional families. I mean, the unconscious sexual tension that exists in such dysfunctional, toxic, narcissistic families. Let's be clear. If a parent uses emotional closeness to justify physical abuse, that is not emotional incest. That is sexual abuse. It is a crime, and it leaves profound trauma in the child's body, mind, and soul forever. Yeah, it changes the child. It literally, changes, who they are. It, in a way, kills their authenticity. It, in a way, you know, uh, changes them for life. Yeah. And, I mean, I have worked with a lot of individuals, I mean, a lot of clients, and, in some of the cases, I mean, after a couple of sessions, they do talk about, the sex thing that exists. Yeah, I mean, my mother was like my second girlfriend, and one day she forced herself onto me. My daddy was very possessive about me, and one day, you know, he pushed boundaries. He molested me. He did this, he did that, she did this, she did that. And it's very difficult to talk about these things. If it's not therapy, and if you're not with someone who's professional and someone who can make you feel safe, it's really difficult to open up, and it's very difficult to talk about these things because there's a lot of guilt and shame. Rather than holding the abuser accountable, people are going to throw labels at you. Rather than holding, the abusers accountable for their action and behavior, people are going to gaslight you, and they're going to accuse you that you are a bad person. You made your father do this. You made your father do that. So sexual violation, uh, in narcissistic families, in some of the cases, in extreme cases, is a form of control. I mean, it's like a last weapon in the arsenal of a narcissistic parent. I have used manipulation, I have used guilt trip, I have used everything, gaslighting, triangulation, minimization, I have used everything, but this guy doesn't listen. This girl is just going out of hand. So the last thing in my arsenal is to engage sexually with my child. Yeah, and that is the most horrible thing, that can happen. And to tell you honestly, I have dealt with such cases, across all continents, across all different countries. It does exist. I mean, there is a bunch of people who will say, no, I mean, this is not, how things are, you're taking it too far. No, these things exist, and this is like a last, resort for these narcissistic parents. Nothing is working. I, threaten the child that I'm going to, not give you any inheritance. I'm going to, disown you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But the child is not listening. The child is still, up with his or her plan. Now, the next thing, the last, weapon, the last tool to control is to engage in sexual activity with the child. And trust me, that literally f's up the child for life. Yeah. Now, coming to, the effects of emotional incest, what exactly happens to the child? Children who grow up in this kind of enmeshment often struggle with guilt for creating distance, even when it's healthy. They confuse love with obligation. They lose their ability to say no. They feel responsible for others' emotions, feelings, and well being. They experience intense body shame and emotional confusion. And, often these folks, I mean, children, who are victim of emotional incest, they often enter in trauma bonded relationships, repeating the same dynamic again and again and again. Their entire sense of self is in a way hijacked by the narcissistic parent. They are not allowed to exist for themselves, but for them, for their creator, and for those who brought him in this world. So they will bring you in this world, do the bare minimum, and then they'll tell you that you need to exist for me and not for yourself. Imagine how painful, how pathetic it is. Now let us understand, how do we heal from such emotional wound? How do we heal from emotional incest? Healing this type of wound isn't about cutting ties and walking away immediately. It's about untangling the psychological knots. And here is where it begins. First thing that we need to do is name what happened without minimizing. So if you were made into a parent's emotional partner, if you carried their pain while suppressing your own, if you were punished for becoming independent, call it out. Call it what it was. And what it was? Emotional incest. It wasn't love or closeness. It was emotional incest. Yeah. Not closeness, not special bond, not we were best friends. It was a pure boundary collapse. It was just boundary violation, and taking enmeshment to a whole different level. The other thing that we need to do is, to reclaim our right to be separate. You are not here to meet anyone else's emotional needs or physical needs or psychological needs or whatsoever. You are not here to meet others' needs. You are your own person, and you are allowed to have secret, space, joy, privacy, and prioritize your very own needs, wants, and requirement. Yeah. So you are you. You are not them, but they trick you into believing that you are not you. You are a part of them. Yeah. So you need to reclaim, your right to be separate. The other thing that you can do is, work through the guilt. Yeah. The false guilt, is how they kept you close. It's how they kept you small. But to tell you honestly, guilt in no ways and forms is morality. It's just the echo of someone else's expectation. Yeah. And you're not wrong for leaving enmeshment. Please understand that it's absolutely okay to, leave a toxic relationship. Yeah. And why are you doing that? Because you're prioritizing yourself. You're doing it for your own well-being. You're doing it for your healing. So never carry that guilt and shame that I'm leaving them. You are not leaving them, but you're prioritizing yourself. So get rid of that guilt, that they hammer inside of you since childhood. And the last thing, that I often suggest to my client, I mean, as a way to heal from emotional incest, is to reparent your inner self. Yeah. Speak to the child inside of you who wanted to be loved and not used and trashed and discarded. Yeah. Who wanted protection and not pressure, who wanted freedom, not fusion. Yeah, give yourself what they couldn't give you. Yeah? And that's really important, on your healing journey. You need to treat that inner child. I mean, when I, started my healing journey, I started prioritizing, the things that I love doing at one point in life. I like painting, craft, art, reading, fish keeping, a lot of things I liked, and I made sure that I started, doing all of those things again. I made sure that I started gifting myself dolls and toys and whatever, I wanted. I started, treating and loving that inner child that was never protected, that was never loved. That child was always abused, trashed, disrespected. So I started treating that child in a good way. I started giving the child that, my narcissistic parents were unable to give that child, apart from that basic, food, clothes, shelter, all that bullshit. There is more. It's not just that, you just give food, clothes, shelter to the child and that's it. Now you can just treat the child however you wish and please. So yes, I mean, emotional incest is, one of the most confusing forms of narcissistic abuse, especially when we are looking at, parent and child relationship, because it is often disguised as love, closeness, devotion, respect. I mean, you just name it. There are a lot of ways, these things are concealed and hidden and kept away, locked up in dark areas and dark rooms. So yes, and before I conclude, to tell you all honestly, emotional incest is one of the most confusing forms of narcissistic abuse because it disguises itself as love, closeness, devotion, respect, obligation, parental love, child's love towards parent, all that BS that you can imagine. But to tell you honestly, love that requires the death of your identity is not love. It's nowhere close to love. It's pure control. And if this hits deep, you're not alone. And you're not crazy. You were conditioned to believe that your worth came from caretaking, but it doesn't. In reality, your worth comes from simply being you. You simply being yourself. That's it. Your worth is not tied to how productive you are or how much of use you are for the others. No. But again, things are, effed up beyond repair in narcissistic households, in narcissistic families. So they make you believe a lot of stupid, disgusting, toxic things. And trust me, healing is all about unlearning all of that bullshit and, keep moving forward. Yeah. Before I end this video, I want to tell you guys that you are allowed to be your own person without guilt, without shame, without permission. And that is what true healing is all about. That is what freedom is all about. Yeah? And it starts now. It might be difficult, but it's not impossible. I have healed myself, still healing, still in the process. I have helped others heal, and they are also in the process. It's an ongoing process. You never truly heal from narcissistic abuse. Something in you changes permanently. Something in you, gets altered and changed for life. So you can never be whole. But yes, I mean, you learn a lot of things. You are able to see things clearly. You are able to process things the way it is. in a way, it's like a learning experience, but a very nasty learning experience if you grew up in a narcissistic family, or if you survived a narcissistic relationship. So yes, this was it. Take care of yourself. Lots of love and blessings to all of you. Bye.